I sat in my small bedroom, clutching the faded bank statement with trembling hands, tears streaming down my weathered cheeks. The paper was worn soft from years of careful handling, 20 years of keeping this secret locked away in my heart. Just hours ago, my daughter-in-law had screamed those words that still echoed in my mind like a broken record. "You're nothing but a worthless burden." Her voice had been so cruel, so cutting. I could still see the disgust in her eyes as she stood in my kitchen. My kitchen. Telling me how I was ruining their lives just. "You contribute nothing," she had spat, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at me like I was something dirty she'd found on her shoe. "Nothing. You're just taking up space in our house, eating our food, breathing our air." My son had stood there, my own flesh and blood, saying nothing, not one word in my defense. I pressed the bank statement against my chest, feeling my heart hammering beneath my ribs. $467,000. That's what this crumpled piece of paper represented. Money I'd saved penny by penny, dollar by dollar, for over 2 decades. Money they had no idea existed. It started when my husband passed away 20 years ago. The life insurance payout, his pension, the sale of our little house. I could have lived comfortably on my own, but my son had insisted I move in with them. "We're family, Mom," he'd said back then, his eyes still kind. "We take care of each other." So I'd quietly invested the money, watching it grow year after year. I told myself I was saving it for emergencies, for medical bills, for my grandchildren's college funds. But deep down, I knew the real reason I kept it secret. I wanted to feel needed for who I was, not what I had. Now, as I listened to their voices drifting up from the living room below, I realized how foolish that dream had been. "She's getting worse," my daughter-in-law was saying, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used when she thought I couldn't hear. "More confused, more difficult. I think it's time we looked into those facilities we talked about." "I don't know." My son's voice was uncertain, but weak, so weak. "Honey, she called me by your ex-girlfriend's name 3 times today. 3 times, and she left the stove on again. What if she burns the house down?" I hadn't called her by anyone else's name. I knew exactly who she was, unfortunately. And the stove? I'd been making soup for their dinner when she'd started screaming at me. Of course I'd forgot to turn it off. "The place I found has an opening next month," she continued. "It's expensive, but we can use the equity from selling this house to pay for it. Start fresh somewhere smaller, just the 3 of us." The 3 of us. My grandson, my son, and her. Not me. I closed my eyes, remembering when my grandson was born 8 years ago. How I'd held him in the hospital, breathing in that sweet baby smell, promising him I'd always be there. I'd rocked him through countless nights when his parents were too exhausted. I'd taught him to tie his shoes, to ride a bike, to bake cookies. Now they wanted to erase me from his life like I'd never existed. "Mom seems happy here," my son said weakly. "This is her home too." Her home? My daughter-in-law's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "This is our home. We pay the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries. She hasn't contributed a dime in years. Face it, honey, she's become dead weight." Dead weight. I opened my eyes and looked at the bank statement again. The numbers blurred through my tears, but I knew them by heart. Not just the total, but every deposit, every dividend, every careful investment decision I'd made. I thought about the times I'd watched them stress over bills. The vacation they'd canceled last year because money was tight. The way my daughter-in-law's face would pinch with worry when she thought no one was looking. I could have helped, should have helped, but I'd wanted to be loved for me, not my money. How pathetically naive I'd been. "The social worker said we should start preparing her," my daughter-in-law continued. "Make it seem like her idea, you know. Less traumatic that way." Traumatic? She was worried about trauma now? I stood up slowly, my arthritis making my joints protest. I walked to my dresser and pulled out the manila envelope I kept hidden beneath my winter sweaters. Inside were all the documents. Bank statements, investment portfolios, certificates of deposit. Nearly $500,000, enough to pay off their mortgage completely. Enough to send my grandson to any college he wanted. Enough to buy them that dream vacation house they'd talked about for years. Enough to make me valuable again. I sat back down on my bed, staring at the papers spread across my faded quilt. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Something cold and determined had settled in my chest, replacing the hurt. If they thought I was worthless, if they believed I contributed nothing, if they saw me as nothing but a burden to be disposed of, well, maybe it was time they learned exactly what this worthless woman was truly worth. I could hear my daughter-in-law still talking downstairs, her voice animated as she described the facility. It has such lovely gardens, and the staff seems so caring. She'll make friends with people her own age. People her own age, code for people we don't have to deal with. I gathered the papers carefully, placing them back in their envelope. Tomorrow morning, I would make some phone calls. It was time to show them that this old woman still had a few surprises left. If you believe a mother's love is sacred, please leave a like, because what I was about to do, it would change everything. I never thought the hands that once cradled my newborn son would one day count out bills in secret, hiding away every spare dollar for 20 years. But let me take you back to how this all began. 15 years ago, when my son first brought her home, she was just a shy girl with nervous laughter and paint-stained fingernails from her art classes. I remember opening my front door that autumn evening, seeing how she clutched his arm, how her eyes darted around my modest living room with its worn furniture and faded family photos. I opened my heart that night. I opened my home. I had been a widow for 10 years by then, living quietly on my small pension, keeping my late husband's inheritance locked away in a private account. Money I'd planned to leave for my son's future, untouched and growing. But when I saw this young woman who might become family, I started giving in other ways. I learned to cook her favorite dishes. The spicy pasta her grandmother used to make, the particular way she liked her coffee with just a hint of cinnamon. My kitchen filled with new aromas as I taught her my own grandmother's recipes, watching her carefully write down measurements in that little notebook she always carried. The smell of fresh bread became our Sunday tradition. When she was pregnant with their first child, these arthritic hands worked through countless evenings, knitting tiny blankets in soft yellows and greens. I could barely hold the needles some nights, my fingers swollen and aching, but I kept going. I dreamed of being the grandmother I'd always wanted to be, of rocking babies wrapped in blankets made with love. I gave up my sewing room when they needed to move in, temporarily, after my son lost his job. That was 8 years ago now. I packed away my quilting frame, my fabric scraps, all the projects I'd been working on for years. The room that had been my sanctuary became their storage space, filled with boxes they never quite got around to unpacking. I remember the weight of those boxes as I helped carry them upstairs, my back protesting with each trip. But I smiled and told them it was no trouble. Family helps family, I said. That's what my mother always taught me. The grocery bills doubled, then tripled. My small pension stretched thinner each month, but I never complained. I started buying generic brands, clipping coupons with the dedication of a woman on a mission. I learned which stores had the best sales, which days they marked down the meat. My purse always held a small calculator and a carefully written shopping list. But what they never knew, what nobody knew, was that every month I managed to save something. $20 here, $50 there. Sometimes just loose change from the couch cushions or the dollar bills forgotten in coat pockets. I became a master at finding ways to stretch every penny, and those saved pennies went straight into that secret account. I watched my daughter-in-law's belly grow round with their second child, and I hand-stitched receiving blankets using fabric scraps I'd collected over the years. The texture of that soft cotton still lives in my fingertips, the memory of late nights spent creating something beautiful for a grandchild I hoped would remember my love someday. When the babies came, I was the one who woke for night feedings while she slept. I was the one who walked the floors during colicky evenings, humming old lullabies my mother sang to me. My shoulders ached from the rocking, my voice grew hoarse from the singing, but those were the sweetest burdens I'd ever carried. I taught her to garden in the small patch behind the house, showing her how to coax tomatoes from reluctant soil, how to know when the green beans were ready for picking. We worked side by side in the summer heat, dirt under our fingernails, sweat beading on our foreheads. I thought we were building something together, a bond, a friendship, a family. During their lean years, I pretended my own needs were smaller than they were. I wore the same winter coat for 6 seasons, mended holes in sweaters that should have been replaced, made my old car last longer than any car should reasonably run. But every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw my son's family thriving under my roof. I helped with homework at the kitchen table, my reading glasses sliding down my nose as I tried to understand the new math they teach children now. I packed school lunches with careful attention to nutrition and little love notes tucked between the sandwiches. I attended every school play, every soccer game, cheering from folding chairs that left permanent creases in my back. The secret account grew slowly but steadily. I learned about certificates of deposit from a kind teller at the bank, discovered how to make my money work harder through simple investments. I read financial magazines at the library, taking careful notes in the margins of my own notebook. What started as survival became strategy. Every month, I would drive to the bank branch across town, where nobody knew me, where I could conduct my business in private. I kept the statements in a manila envelope hidden beneath my bedroom dresser, under the faded quilt my mother made for my wedding day. Sometimes I would take them out and count the growing numbers, allowing myself a small smile of pride. I sacrificed my comfort, my space, my independence, believing it was what family did for each other. I believed love meant giving until it hurt, then giving a little more. I believed my worth was measured in what I could provide, what I could endure, what I could sacrifice for the people I loved most. But tonight, as I sit here in my small bedroom, listening to voices drift up from the kitchen below, I'm learning that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes sacrifice isn't appreciated. Sometimes the very people you've given everything to see you as nothing more than a burden to be managed. They don't know about the envelope under my dresser. They don't know about the account that now holds nearly $500,000. They see only a tired old woman who takes up space in their lives, never realizing that this tired old woman has been their safety net all along. I never thought the woman I welcomed into my home with open arms would become the one to destroy my sense of worth. It started so subtly, I almost missed it. The first time she rolled her eyes when I offered to help with dinner, I told myself she was just tired. New mothers are exhausted, I reasoned. When she began pushing my carefully prepared meals to the side of her plate, claiming they were too bland or not what we're used to, I started buying different spices, trying to please her. I gave up my sewing room for her. 23 years I'd had that space, with my grandmother's old Singer machine and the window that caught the morning light just right. But when they needed somewhere for the baby's things, I packed it all away without a word. "It's just temporary," she said, but I watched her arrange her workout equipment where my quilting frame used to sit. The comments became sharper. She'd laugh at my old television in front of her friends, rolling her eyes when I'd suggest we watch something together. "Look at this ancient thing," she'd say, gesturing dismissively. "It's like living in a museum." When I wore my favorite cardigan to church, she whispered loudly to my son, "Couldn't you at least buy her something from this decade?" I bit my tongue. I told myself she was adjusting to living here, that things would get better once she felt more settled. But deep down, something was changing inside me. Each cruel word felt like a small cut, and I was bleeding in ways nobody could see. The day she called me worthless. I'll never forget it. I was coming back from the bathroom, moving slowly because my arthritis was acting up. Their voices carried from the kitchen, and I heard my name. Something made me stop in the hallway, just out of sight. "She's becoming a burden," she was saying to my son. "Look at her, shuffling around here like some ghost. She contributes absolutely nothing to this family." My heart started pounding. I pressed my back against the wall, hardly breathing. "She cooks for us," my son said weakly. "Terrible food that nobody wants to eat. And have you seen how shaky her hands are getting? Yesterday, I caught her nearly dropping the baby when she was trying to change his diaper. She's becoming dangerous." "Mom's not that bad." "Not that bad," her voice rose. "She's worthless. A useless old woman taking up space in what should be our home. We need to start looking into those places. You know, care facilities. Somewhere she can be watched properly." I felt like the floor was falling away beneath me. 15 years I'd been supporting them. 15 years of opening my home, my heart, my wallet. When my son lost his job, who paid the mortgage? When they needed a car, who co-signed the loan? When the baby needed formula and diapers, who made sure there was always money? Me. It was always me, but I'd been careful about it. I never made them feel small or dependent. I'd slip money into my son's wallet when he wasn't looking. I'd accidentally buy too much at the grocery store. I'd pay bills and tell them the amounts were smaller than they actually were. I wanted them to feel capable, successful. What a fool I'd been. "Think about it," she continued. "We could sell this old house, get something modern in a better neighborhood, without her medical expenses and needs. We'd actually have a life." I heard my son's chair scrape against the floor. "I don't know, she is my mother. And she's had her life, now it's time for us to have ours. She's holding us back, and you know it. Every time we want to go somewhere or do something, we have to consider her limitations. I'm tired of living like this." That's when she saw me. I must have moved, or maybe made a sound, because suddenly she was standing in the kitchen doorway, staring at me with those cold eyes. My son appeared behind her, his face flushing red with embarrassment. "How long have you been standing there?" she demanded. I couldn't speak. My throat felt closed like someone was squeezing it. Well, she crossed her arms. Did you hear what you needed to hear? Finally, I found my voice. I heard enough. That's when she really let me have it. Good. Maybe now you'll understand the reality of the situation. You're absolutely worthless. A useless old woman who's become nothing but a burden to everyone around you. She stepped closer, her voice getting louder with each word. You shuffle around this house like you own the place, but what do you actually contribute? Nothing. You can barely take care of yourself, let alone help with anything meaningful. My son just stood there, silent, watching his wife tear me apart and saying nothing. You want to know what I really think? She continued, her face twisted with disgust. I think you're pathetic. Clinging to relevance when everyone can see you're just done, finished, taking up space that younger, more capable people could be using. I felt something inside me break, not just my heart, but something deeper. The part of me that had been trying so hard to be useful, to be loved, to be wanted. I've given you everything, I whispered. She laughed, actually laughed. Given us what? This old house that's falling apart, your outdated opinions. Your constant hovering. I've supported this family for 15 years. Supported us? She looked genuinely confused. With what? Your social security check barely covers your medications. That night, I sat in my bedroom with the manila envelope I keep hidden in my dresser drawer. Inside were bank statements, investment portfolios, certificates of deposit, numbers that would shock them. Numbers that represented 20 years of careful saving, of learning about compound interest, of making smart choices while everyone assumed I was just a helpless old woman. Nearly $500,000. Money I'd been setting aside for my son's future, for his children's education, for emergencies and opportunities. Money they had no idea existed. As I sat there, holding those papers, I realized something had shifted inside me. The woman who had been desperate to please, desperate to be useful, desperate to be loved. She was gone. In her place was someone who finally understood her own worth. Have you ever been betrayed by family? Tell me in the comments. I never thought I'd be sitting alone in my bedroom at 73, clutching my wedding photo and wondering if I'd become invisible in my own life. But there I was, holding that faded picture of my husband and me from 50 years ago, both of us so young and hopeful, with no idea what the future would bring. The house was quiet except for the muffled sounds coming from the living room, where my son and his wife were watching television. I could hear her laugh occasionally, that sharp, cutting laugh that had become so familiar over the past 15 years. The same laugh I'd heard earlier when she was talking to her sister on the phone. She's like a piece of furniture that won't leave, she'd said, not knowing I was listening from the hallway. Completely worthless, takes up space and contributes nothing. I pressed the photo to my chest and felt the tears come silently. The paper was soft with age, the corners worn from years of handling. My husband looked so handsome in his navy uniform, and I looked like someone who believed in forever, someone who thought love could conquer anything. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, in the house I'd opened to them when they couldn't afford their own place. The house where I'd given up my sewing room so they could have a proper office. The house where I'd quietly absorbed the mounting grocery bills, the utility costs, the endless stream of expenses that came with supporting a young family. I set the photo on my nightstand and walked to the old dresser that had belonged to my mother. The bottom drawer stuck slightly. It always had, but I managed to pull it open and push aside the folded sweaters until I felt the familiar manila envelope tucked beneath them. My hands trembled as I pulled out the bank statements. Page after page of careful savings, investment portfolios, certificates of deposit. Numbers that told a story she would never believe. Numbers that represented 20 years of quiet discipline, of learning about the stock market from library books, of turning my husband's life insurance into something substantial. $487,632. I'd memorized that number. It had grown slowly, methodically, while I clipped coupons and shopped sales and wore the same cardigan for 3 winters in a row. While she complained about my cheap cooking and rolled her eyes at my secondhand furniture. While my son smiled apologetically and promised things would get better once they got back on their feet. 15 years they'd been getting back on their feet. I spread the statements across my faded quilt, the one I'd made when my son was born, each square carefully chosen and stitched with love. The irony was almost funny. She saw an old woman who counted pennies and darned socks. She had no idea that I could write a check tomorrow and buy a house twice the size of this one. But what would be the point? Money couldn't buy back the respect I'd lost. It couldn't erase the words I'd overheard, or the way my son nodded along when she complained about having me underfoot all the time. It couldn't undo the slow erosion of my place in this family, the way I'd become background noise in my own life. I picked up the small calculator I kept in the envelope and ran the numbers again, as if they might have changed. The dividends from the blue chip stocks my husband had taught me about. The interest from the CDs I'd rolled over year after year. The growth in the mutual funds I'd researched so carefully. Almost $500,000 that they knew nothing about. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly gathered the papers, shoving them back into the envelope. My heart raced as I pushed the drawer closed and arranged the sweaters to look undisturbed. My son appeared in the doorway, his expression soft with what looked like pity. "Mom, you okay? You've been awfully quiet tonight." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw his father's eyes, his father's gentle smile. But I also saw someone who had stood by while his wife called me worthless. Someone who had let 15 years of small cruelties accumulate without once standing up for the woman who had raised him. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." He nodded and started to leave, then turned back. "You know we love you, right, Mom? I know things have been tense lately, but you're family." Family? The word felt hollow in the quiet room. I was family when they needed help with the mortgage. Family when they wanted free babysitting for weekend getaways. Family when the car broke down or the washing machine died. But apparently not family enough to be treated with basic human dignity. "I know, honey," I whispered. After he left, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror. When had I become this woman? This invisible, shuffling presence in the corners of other people's lives. When had I stopped mattering? I opened the drawer again and pulled out just one statement, the most recent one. The number at the bottom represented freedom, independence, the ability to walk away from people who saw me as a burden. But it also represented something sadder. It represented the realization that I had been saving for a future with people who had already written me off. I had been planning to surprise my son with financial security, maybe help with his children's college funds, leave behind a legacy of love and support. Instead, I was sitting alone in the dark, clutching bank statements like a secret shame, wondering if the people I loved most in the world would even notice if I disappeared. I folded the statement carefully and put it back in the envelope. Tomorrow, I decided I would make some calls. Maybe visit that nice apartment complex I'd seen downtown, the one with the beautiful garden and the activities director who always smiled when she waved from the lobby. Because if I was going to be invisible, I might as well be invisible in a place where I could have some peace. I picked up the wedding photo one more time and traced my husband's face with my finger. "What would you do?" I whispered to the empty room, but I already knew the answer. He would have stood up for me. He would have demanded better. Maybe it was time I demanded better for myself. I never thought I'd see the day when 20 years of careful planning would finally serve its purpose. But as I sat in that financial advisor's office the next morning, watching him spread my documents across his mahogany desk, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Power. "Mrs." he began, then caught himself. "Ma'am, these portfolios have performed exceptionally well. Your husband would be proud." His fingers traced the columns of numbers on my investment statements. Between the municipal bonds, the dividend stocks, and the real estate trust, you're looking at just over $470,000. $470,000. I let that number sink in as I walked back to the house, my purse clutched tightly against my chest, containing copies of everything. The manila envelope felt like it weighed nothing and everything at the same time. She was in the kitchen when I returned, talking loudly on her phone while my son loaded the dishwasher. "I swear, living with an old woman is like having a child," she was saying. "Except children eventually grow up and move out." I cleared my throat. Both of them turned, and I could see the annoyance flash across her face. "I need to speak with you both," I said quietly. "In the living room." "Can it wait?" she huffed. "I'm trying to schedule a tour of that assisted living place I told you about." "No," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in months. "It cannot wait." Something in my tone must have surprised them because they actually followed me. I sat in my husband's old recliner, the one she'd been trying to convince my son to donate for months, and opened the envelope. "For the past 20 years," I began, "while you've been living in this house rent-free, eating food I've paid for, using utilities I've covered, I've been doing something you never bothered to ask about." I pulled out the first bank statement. "I've been building something." My son leaned forward, confused. Mom, what are you talking about? Your father left me more than just this house, I continued, my hand surprisingly steady as I arranged the papers on the coffee table. He left me investments, small ones at first, but I've been adding to them every month for 20 years. She was staring at the papers now, her phone forgotten in her lap. What is all this? Bank statements, investment portfolios, certificates of deposit. I placed each document deliberately. This is my Schwab account. This is my Vanguard portfolio. This is the real estate investment trust your father set up before he died. My son's eyes widened as he saw the numbers. Mom, these can't be right. They're very right, I said. Updated as of yesterday morning. $470,312. And 47 cents, if you want to be exact. The silence that followed was deafening. She was frantically scanning the papers, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. This has to be some kind of mistake. No mistake, I said. 20 years of careful saving. 20 years of living modestly, while you assumed I was just a burden with no resources. 20 years of clipping coupons and shopping sales so I could add $50 here, $100 there, to accounts you never knew existed. But you always said you were on a tight budget, my son stammered. You said you couldn't afford to eat out, couldn't afford new clothes. I couldn't, I replied, because every extra dollar went into building my future. The future I thought would include taking care of my family, maybe helping with grandchildren's college funds someday. I paused, looking directly at her. The future I thought would involve being valued, not just tolerated. She was shaking her head, still staring at the investment statements. You let us think, you let us believe you were practically destitute. I never said I was destitute, you assumed it. You assumed that because I lived simply, because I didn't waste money on restaurants and expensive clothes, that I had nothing. I gathered the papers back into a neat pile. You assumed that because I was old, I was worthless. My son was looking between us, his face pale. Mom, why are you showing us this now? Because yesterday, I overheard a conversation that changed everything, I said. A conversation about how I'm worthless, useless, taking up space. A conversation about shipping me off to some facility so you could have your privacy back. The color drained from her face. You heard that. Every word. I stood up, the manila envelope tucked under my arm. And it made me realize something important. I've been saving this money for the wrong reasons. I thought I was building a legacy for family who loved me. Instead, I've been building my independence from family who see me as a burden. Mom, please, my son started, but I held up my hand. I called my attorney this morning, after I met with the financial advisor, I continued. Did you know that with this amount of money, I can afford a very nice senior living community? The kind with housekeeping services, meal plans, activities, the kind where I'd be surrounded by people who might actually enjoy my company. She was gripping the arm of the couch now, her knuckles white. You can't just leave. Actually, I can. This is my house, remember? The house you've been living in rent-free, the house I can sell if I choose to. I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. Or I can stay here and use my resources to make myself comfortable. Maybe hire a housekeeper so I don't have to clean up after people who don't appreciate me. Maybe take those trips I've always wanted to take. I walked toward the stairs, then turned back. You know what the funny thing is? If you had just treated me with basic human kindness, I would have happily shared all of this with you. I would have helped with your dreams, your goals, your children's futures. But you taught me something valuable yesterday. What's that? My son asked quietly. I wonder where my voice is reaching right now, across how many miles and borders. Tell me your city and country below. You taught me that being alone with dignity is better than being surrounded by people who see you as worthless. I climbed the first step, then paused. I'll let you know what I decide to do with my fortune. After all, it's mine to do with as I please. I never thought I'd see such a complete transformation in another human being. It happened on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after that horrible conversation I'd overheard from my bedroom. I had stepped out to pick up my prescription from the pharmacy, leaving the house quiet as usual. When I returned, fumbling with my keys at the front door, I could hear the phone ringing inside. By the time I made it to the kitchen, she had already answered. Hello, this is the residence, she said in that formal tone she used for strangers. I set my purse down quietly, not wanting to interrupt. Oh yes, she lives here, she continued, and something in her voice made me pause. Mrs. What, portfolio review? There was a long silence, and I could practically hear her brain working. Inheritance fund, how much did you say? My blood turned to ice. My financial advisor wasn't supposed to call the house line. We always communicated through my personal cell phone, but I'd forgotten to charge it the night before. 480,000. Her voice cracked on the numbers. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You're calling about my mother-in-law's investment accounts. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching her grip the phone with white knuckles. 20 years of careful planning, of quiet investments and modest living, all exposed in one accidental phone call. No, she's not here right now, she stammered. Could you call back later? On her cell phone, thank you. She hung up the phone and stood there for a full minute, staring at it like it might explode. I cleared my throat softly. Oh, she spun around, her face flushed. You're back, how was your appointment? The change was immediate and jarring. Gone was the cold indifference, the barely concealed irritation that had colored every interaction for 8 years. Instead, she was looking at me with wide, almost hungry eyes. It was quite enlightening, I said simply, hanging my coat on the hook by the door. I watched her carefully, noting how she seemed to be seeing me for the first time. Well, that's wonderful, she said, her voice unnaturally bright. Are you feeling all right? You look a little tired. Maybe you should sit down. Can I get you some tea? I'd been making my own tea for 8 years. She'd never once offered. That's very kind of you, I said, settling into my usual chair at the kitchen table. She bustled around, opening cabinets she'd probably never looked in before, searching for the good china. Over the next few days, the transformation was nothing short of theatrical. Suddenly, she was cooking elaborate meals and asking what I preferred. I thought you might like roast chicken tonight, she'd say with that sickly sweet smile. With those roasted potatoes you enjoy. She'd never noticed what I enjoyed before. She bought flowers, actual flowers, and placed them on the kitchen table. Just to brighten things up, she explained, as if she hadn't spent years complaining about unnecessary expenses. The most jarring change was how she spoke to me. Where once there had been clipped, impatient tones, now there was syrupy concern. How did you sleep, dear? She'd ask each morning. Is there anything special you'd like to do today? Dear, she called me dear. I watched this performance with quiet fascination, like studying an exotic species. She would catch herself mid-sentence sometimes, as if remembering she was supposed to be nice now. The effort was exhausting to witness. By Thursday evening, I couldn't take it anymore. She was fussing over my dinner plate, asking if the chicken was seasoned properly, when I set down my fork and looked at her directly. I know you found out about the money, I said calmly. Her face went completely white. The serving spoon clattered against the edge of the dish. I don't know what you mean, she stammered, but her hands were shaking. The phone call on Tuesday, my financial advisor. You answered and learned about my investment accounts. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish, then sank into the chair across from me. I didn't mean to. He called the wrong number and I just... $480,000, I said quietly. That's what he told you, isn't it? She nodded miserably. Did you really think your sudden kindness would fool me? I continued, my voice steady and calm. For 8 years, you've called me worthless. You've treated me like an unwanted burden, discussed putting me away like I was broken furniture. And now that you know what I'm worth in dollars, you want to pretend you care. That's not, I never said. She started, but we both knew it was a lie. 3 days ago, you stood in this very kitchen and told my son I was useless, that I contributed nothing to this household. You said I was taking up space and costing money. Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy, not anymore. I heard every word, I continued. I heard you planning my future like I was already dead. And now you discover I have nearly $500,000, and suddenly I'm worth your attention. Please, she whispered, I was stressed about money, and I said things I didn't mean. You know I care about you. No, I said firmly. I know exactly what you think of me. The only thing that's changed is your knowledge of my bank account. I stood up from the table, leaving my half-eaten dinner. The flowers are lovely, by the way, but they don't erase 8 years of cruelty. As I walked toward my room, I heard her sobbing behind me. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control of my own life. I didn't kick them out, that would have made me just like her. Instead, I set boundaries. The next morning, I sat them both down at the kitchen table. My hands were steady as I poured coffee into 3 cups, the good china I'd been saving for special occasions. Why had I been waiting? Every day I wake up breathing is special enough. You can continue living here, I told them both, looking directly at my son, then at her. but with respect, or you can find somewhere else. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. My voice was calm, measured. There will be house rules now. No more cruel comments about my age, my abilities, or my worth. No more treating me like furniture that happens to pay bills. And absolutely no expectations about my money. My son's face crumpled. Mom, I should have said something, all those times she. He couldn't finish, but I saw the shame in his eyes. Yes, you should have, I said simply. But you're saying something now, and that matters. She sat there, her face cycling through emotions. Anger, calculation, something that might have been genuine remorse. I couldn't tell anymore, and honestly, I didn't care to figure it out. I was wrong, she finally whispered. I was so wrong about everything. I nodded. You were, but people can change if they choose to. The weeks that followed were different. She tried to be pleasant, bringing me tea without being asked, complimenting my cooking. But it felt hollow, like watching someone perform a play they'd never auditioned for. We both knew the truth. She'd shown me who she really was when she thought I had nothing to offer. But something beautiful came from all this pain. I started volunteering at the community center, teaching financial planning classes for seniors. The first day, 12 people showed up, mostly women my age, clutching worn purses and looking uncertain. How many of you have money tucked away somewhere? I asked. Money your families don't know about. Every hand went up. There was Margaret, who'd been secretly saving loose change for 30 years and had nearly $8,000 hidden in mason jars. Robert, who'd been quietly investing his Social Security in a modest portfolio his children assumed didn't exist. Dorothy, who'd been selling her handmade quilts online and saving every penny. All of them afraid to seem burdensome to their families. All of them hiding their small victories because they'd been made to feel worthless. Your worth isn't measured by your bank account, I told them, remembering my husband's gentle voice. But people will often only see your value when they think you have something they want. The trick is knowing your worth regardless of whether they see it. I taught them about compound interest, about diversifying investments, about the power of time. But more than that, I taught them about dignity. Every evening, I come home to a house that feels different now. My son really talks about his work, his dreams, his fears about being a better husband and someday, maybe, a father. He asks my advice and actually listens to the answers. As for her, she's polite, careful. Sometimes I catch her watching me with this curious expression, like she's trying to solve a puzzle. I think she's wondering what other secrets this worthless old woman might be keeping. I just smile and tend to my garden. I planted tomatoes this spring, big, beautiful beefsteak tomatoes that my husband always loved. The first one ripened last week, and I sliced it thick, sprinkled it with salt, and ate it standing at the kitchen window, juice running down my chin. It tasted like victory. I still wear my husband's silver locket, but now it reminds me of something different. Not of loss, but of his wisdom in teaching me to prepare for moments exactly like this. He knew I'd need to be strong someday. He knew I'd need to stand up for myself. You're tougher than you think, he used to say when I doubted myself, like a wildflower growing through concrete. I understand now what he meant. The money sits in my accounts, growing quietly. I've started a small scholarship fund at the local community college for older students returning to school. I bought myself a new sewing machine, top of the line, with all the bells and whistles I used to think were frivolous. I make quilts now for the shelter downtown, and each stitch feels like a prayer, like a small act of rebellion against anyone who ever made me feel small. Some nights, I sit in my reclaimed sewing room, surrounded by fabrics and patterns, and I think about that conversation I overheard. How it shattered something inside me, yes, but also how it freed me. I was so busy trying to earn their love, their respect, their simple acknowledgement that I forgot the most important thing: I already had worth. I always had worth. It didn't come from my bank account, or my usefulness, or my ability to make myself small enough to fit into their idea of what I should be. It came from being human, from being me. That's the lesson I try to share with my senior students, with anyone who will listen. You don't have to earn the right to take up space in this world. You already belong here. My daughter-in-law still lives in my house, still tries to navigate this new dynamic, where I'm not the grateful, invisible woman she once knew. Sometimes I see flashes of the person she might be if she could let go of whatever makes her so afraid, so cruel. But that's her journey to make. Mine is simpler now. I wake up each morning in my own home, make coffee in my own kitchen, and tend my own garden. I teach classes, I make quilts, I laugh with friends who see me as I am. And sometimes, when the light hits my tomatoes just right, I swear I can hear my husband's voice on the breeze, proud and loving. There's my wildflower growing through concrete. If this story touched you, subscribe to Silent Confessions for more stories of finding strength in unexpected places.